Hello and welcome to Whispering Tales. Tonight's story will take you deep into a dark forest, where every shadow hides something watching you. Get comfortable, turn down the lights, and let the chill run down your spine. I remember that day clearly, not because anything seemed unusual at first, but because of how ordinary it all was. The kind of ordinary that makes you think nothing bad could possibly happen. The late summer air was warm but not suffocating, with a faint breeze carrying the smell of pine and damp soil. The sun peeked through the canopy, scattering playful golden spots across the mossy ground. It was the perfect day for mushroom picking, or at least, that's what we thought. I was with two of my closest friends, Mark and Daniel. Mark had this old wicker basket swinging in his hand, already half filled with chanterelles and boletes, and Daniel kept cracking dumb jokes about how he was the mushroom whisperer. I laughed, but even then I noticed something odd. The deeper we walked into the forest, the quieter it became. At first, I thought maybe we just left the busier trails behind. But after a while, I realized I couldn't hear the distant hum of cars, or the chirping of birds, or even the usual rustling of leaves in the wind. It was like someone had pressed a mute button on the world. We kept going, pushing past low branches and stepping over gnarled roots that snaked across the path. The sunlight grew weaker, not because it was getting late, but because the trees seemed to be growing denser, thicker trunks, heavier leaves. It felt as though the forest itself was closing in on us. Daniel stopped suddenly, tilting his head. "You guys hear that?" he asked. Mark and I exchanged a glance. "Hear what?" "That's the thing. I'm not hearing anything. No birds, no wind, nothing." A strange unease settled over me, but I tried to brush it off. "It's fine," I said. "We're just far from the main path. Come on, we've still got daylight." We walked for another 15 minutes, though it felt like more. The ground beneath our feet shifted from dry soil to a damp, spongy texture, and with every step, the smell of earth and decaying leaves grew stronger. My shoes made soft squelching noises, and each time, the sound seemed too loud in the oppressive silence. That's when I noticed something carved into the bark of a nearby birch tree. It was a symbol, two overlapping circles with jagged lines running through them. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the deep grooves as if someone had hacked into the tree with a knife. The cuts were fresh. Bits of pale wood still clung to the edges. "Local kids messing around?" Mark suggested, but his voice was quieter than usual, almost like he didn't want to draw attention to us. We passed another tree with the same symbol, and then another. Soon, the marks seemed to be everywhere, like some invisible hand had been guiding us into the forest without our knowing. By now, the sunlight was little more than a dim glow filtering through the canopy. The air felt heavier, thicker, as though the forest was holding its breath. I told myself we'd turn back soon, but for some reason, we didn't. We kept walking, deeper and deeper, unaware that we had already stepped into a place we weren't meant to find. By the time we realized the light was fading, the forest had already swallowed the day. The last streaks of gold were gone, replaced by a deep, oppressive gray that seemed to seep from the trees themselves. I glanced at my watch. It wasn't even 6 p.m., but it felt like the middle of the night. "We should head back," I suggested, forcing a casual tone. No one argued, but as we turned around, I had the uneasy sensation that the path behind us wasn't the same one we'd taken in. The trees looked different, closer together, their trunks darker and rougher, their branches knotted like clenched fists. Daniel squinted at the ground. Did we cross this before?" He was pointing at a half-buried deer skull, the bleached bone cracked and weathered. The antlers had been broken off, jagged at the base, as though something had snapped them with brute force. Mark's voice was shaky. "I don't remember seeing that." We kept moving, trying to convince ourselves that the skull was just an odd coincidence. But then we saw another, and another. Some were small, foxes, rabbits. Others, larger, all of them arranged in strange positions, always facing the same direction, deeper into the woods. My chest tightened. I didn't want to follow where they were pointing, but there was no other way forward. The forest floor was becoming uneven, almost like it was leading us uphill, though I couldn't recall any hills in this area. That's when the smell hit me. Not the damp earth from before, but something sharp and metallic, blood. It was faint at first, just enough to make my stomach twist, but the further we went, the stronger it became. Mark gagged. Jesus, what is that? We rounded a cluster of pines and stopped dead. Hanging from one of the branches was the carcass of a wild boar, its body split open from throat to belly. The flesh was dark and glistening, the ribs exposed like pale prison bars. Its head lolled to one side, eyes glazed, mouth open in a silent scream. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel muttered, "We need to get out of here. Now." I wanted to agree, but as we turned again, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. Something, or someone, was standing among the trees. I froze. It was too dark to make out details, but the figure was tall, motionless, its head tilted in a way that didn't seem human. My breath caught in my throat. I blinked, and it was gone. "Did you see that?" I whispered. "See what?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. "Never mind," I lied. We walked faster now, our footsteps crunching on dry leaves and snapping twigs, each sound echoing far too loudly in the dead air. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see that figure again. The symbols on the trees were everywhere now, carved deeper, more violently. Some of them were smeared with something dark. I didn't want to think about what it was. Then, faintly, from somewhere in the distance, came the sound of a scream. It wasn't close, but it was sharp and ragged, cutting through the silence like a knife. We all stopped, looking at each other, our faces pale. Daniel broke the silence. "That wasn't an animal." My hands were sweating so badly that the handle of my basket felt slick. Every instinct in me screamed to run, but run where? We didn't know which way was out anymore. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the scream was replaced by something worse, laughter. Slow, deliberate, and echoing through the trees, bouncing from every direction at once. That's when I knew we weren't alone in this forest. The forest had a way of swallowing sound. Even the crunch of my boots on the damp earth seemed muted, absorbed by the looming trees. We had been walking in circles, I was sure of it. The moss on the trunks, the twisted branches that reached like skeletal fingers, the half-rotted log covered in mushrooms. I had seen them all before. But my friends didn't seem to notice. Or maybe they didn't want to admit it. "Are we lost?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid that if I spoke too loudly, the forest might answer. "No," Lisa said quickly, glancing over her shoulder. "We just need to keep moving. The road can't be far." Her tone was too sharp, too forced. She was scared. We all were. Somewhere off to the right, a branch snapped. Not the light crack of a twig, but the heavy, deliberate break of something large moving through the undergrowth. We froze. Mark raised his flashlight, but the beam just bounced off the dense fog between the trees. "Probably a deer," he said, though his voice carried none of its usual confidence. But deer didn't move like that. They didn't stalk. We walked faster now, not quite running, but close. Every few steps, I caught movement in the periphery, a shadow shifting between trunks, just far enough away that I could never be sure it was real. And then, the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the wind, curling through the branches overhead. But no, these were words. Muffled, just out of reach, like a conversation happening in the next room. The cadence was wrong, too slow, too deliberate. "Do you hear that?" I asked. Mark nodded without looking at me. Lisa didn't respond, just kept walking, her shoulders stiff. We broke into a small clearing, the last light of day bleeding out of the sky above. And that's when I saw it. A dark stain on the ground, glistening under Mark's flashlight. Blood, fresh. It trailed off into the woods, a broken, uneven path of crimson that disappeared into the fog. Lisa made a sound, half gasp, half sob. We should go back, she whispered. But before we could decide, a distant scream tore through the night. High-pitched, human. It came from somewhere ahead, along the trail of blood. We didn't speak, we just moved. The forest seemed to press in tighter with each step, the air thickening, the whispers growing louder. I caught glimpses now, not just shadows, but shapes, figures, watching, waiting. Something told me that if we stopped, if we hesitated for even a moment, we wouldn't leave this forest at all. The scream had died away, leaving only a ringing in my ears and the rapid pounding of my heartbeat. None of us spoke, we just kept moving, our steps quick and uneven, as if the ground itself might reach up and grab us if we lingered. The trail of blood was harder to follow now. It smeared into the leaves, soaked into the earth, but every so often, Mark's flashlight would catch a fresh drop, glistening like a warning. The whispers had changed. They weren't drifting aimlessly anymore. They were behind us, and they were closer. I could feel them brushing against the back of my neck, curling into my ears. Words I couldn't understand, but tones that made my stomach knot. Then, through the suffocating black of the forest, I saw it, a faint glow ahead. Not the cold silver of the moon, not the sharp white of a flashlight. This was warm, flickering fire. We slowed without meaning to, our footsteps cautious now. The glow pulsed, like it was breathing. I could smell something, too, smoke, yes, but also something thicker, sour, metallic. The trees opened slightly, and I crouched low, motioning for the others to do the same. My breath caught in my throat. In the center of a small clearing, a circle of figures stood around a roaring fire. They were cloaked in long, dark robes, the hoods pulled low so their faces were nothing but shadows. Between them, strung from wooden poles, hung the carcasses of animals, deer, rabbits, something larger I couldn't immediately recognize. Their bodies were painted with strange symbols, crude and uneven, drawn in what I knew without doubt was blood. One of the figures knelt beside a flat stone, carving something into it with a jagged blade. Another poured a thick, dark liquid into a shallow bowl, chanting in a low, rhythmic voice. I couldn't move. My mind screamed to turn back, to run, but my body was frozen, my eyes locked on the scene before me. Then one of them stopped. Slowly, deliberately, the hooded head turned, and though I couldn't see eyes beneath the shadow, I felt them lock on me. My breath hitched. The chanting didn't stop, the others didn't turn, but I knew, somehow, they had always known we were here. Behind me, Lisa whispered, "We need to go." But the figure tilted its head slightly, and the air seemed to shift. The fire burned higher, and from the forest around us came a sound that made my skin crawl. Footsteps, too many to count, moving in perfect unison. We weren't just watching them. We were surrounded. The footsteps came from all directions now, pressing in from the trees like a tightening noose. My breath was shallow, my heartbeat so loud I thought it would give us away. Lisa clutched my arm, her nails digging into my jacket. Mark was whispering something over and over. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded like a prayer. The figure who had seen us stepped forward into the firelight, and the rest of the circle parted slightly to let them pass. The robe swayed with each movement, the hood still hiding their face. In their hand, they held something long and curved. At first I thought it was a knife, but as the firelight flickered over it, I saw it was carved from bone. They stopped just at the edge of the clearing, tilting their head again, the way a predator studies its prey. "Come," the voice rasped, deep, and yet strangely hollow, as if echoing from a place far away. Lisa whimpered, and I shook my head, mouthing "Don't move." But then the forest around us seemed to breathe. The shadows thickened, and between the trees, more figures emerged. Dozens of them, each one cloaked and hooded, each one holding something, a staff, a lantern, a rope. We backed away, but it didn't matter. Every step we took was mirrored by the silent advance of the others. The fire roared suddenly, sending a spray of sparks into the night sky, and the chanting rose again. I could feel it in my bones, like it was rattling something loose inside me. The first figure extended a pale hand from beneath the robe. It was skeletal, the skin stretched thin, the nails long and blackened. In the center of the palm was a mark, a perfect circle, burned deep into the flesh. Lisa gasped. She didn't finish. Behind us, something brushed against my shoulder. I spun, and there was another robed figure less than a foot away, the hood so close I could see my own terrified reflection in the glint of their teeth. Mark bolted. He ran straight into the trees, crashing through the undergrowth. The figure in front of us raised their bone blade high, and the rest moved in unison, the chanting shifting into something faster, frenzied. Lisa grabbed my wrist. We have to move, now. And we did. We tore through the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots clawing at our feet. Behind us, the firelight flickered between the trees, and the chanting didn't fade. It grew louder. Somewhere ahead, Mark screamed, a raw, agonizing sound that was cut off far too quickly. Lisa stumbled, and I pulled her up, but my stomach twisted. I didn't know if we were running toward safety or deeper into whatever nightmare we had found. The forest seemed endless, and no matter how far we ran, the sound of those voices followed, and somewhere in the dark, I swore I could still see the faint glow of that fire. The forest floor was slick with wet leaves, each step threatening to send us sprawling. My lungs burned, every breath a ragged gasp in the icy air. Lisa's grip on my wrist was the only thing keeping me from losing her in the dark. Somewhere behind us, branches snapped, not in random patterns, but in heavy, deliberate steps. Whoever, whatever, was following us, wasn't in a hurry. They knew we couldn't get far. We stumbled into a narrow path, barely wide enough for the two of us. On either side, the trees rose so tall they blocked out the moonlight, and for a moment, the darkness was total. "Stop," Lisa whispered, pulling me behind a fallen log. We crouched low, listening. The chanting had stopped, replaced by silence so deep it made my ears ring. That's when I saw it. A faint glow ahead, between the trees. Not the warm flicker of the fire we'd left behind. This light was cold, bluish, like moonlight caught in ice. Lisa looked at me, her eyes wide. It could be a house, a road, something. I wanted to believe her, but the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. Still, we moved toward it, slow at first, then faster, until we broke through a curtain of branches and froze. In a small clearing stood an ancient stone arch, half buried in moss. The blue light pulsed from within it, swirling faintly, as if the air itself was moving inside. On the ground around the arch lay animal carcasses, rabbits, deer, even a fox, arranged in a perfect circle, their eyes open and glassy, their bodies untouched except for the single deep cut across their throats. Lisa covered her mouth, gagging. I couldn't look away. From the shadows at the edge of the clearing, the robed figures stepped out. All of them, dozens, maybe more. They formed a circle around us, just like before, only this time, there was no fire, no chanting. The one with the bone blade approached. Slowly, they lifted their hood. The face beneath wasn't human. The skin was pale and stretched tight over sharp angles, the eyes black and bottomless, the mouth too wide, too full of teeth. They extended their marked hand toward me. "Step through," the voice rasped, the same hollow tone as before, but now it seemed to come from inside my head. Lisa clutched my arm. "Don't, please." I looked at her, then at the arch. The blue light swirled faster, pulling at me, making the air vibrate. My legs felt heavy, my vision narrowing. The last thing I heard before everything went white was Lisa screaming my name. When I woke up, the world was wrong. The ground beneath me was damp and cold, but it wasn't the forest floor I remembered. Instead, I lay on a surface that looked like stone but shimmered faintly, like light trapped under glass. The air smelled metallic, sharp, almost like blood. There was no sky, just a gray, endless dome stretching above me, swirling with shadows that sometimes moved like they were alive. I called out for Lisa, my voice echoing in a way that made it sound delayed, like someone was repeating my words a fraction of a second later. No answer. In the distance, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was her, but as it drew closer, I realized it was me, or at least, it wore my face. Its walk was wrong, too smooth. Its smile was slow, deliberate. When it stopped in front of me, I noticed its eyes were completely black. "You made it," it said, though its lips didn't move. I stumbled back, my mind screaming to wake up, to find the forest, to see the moon again. But then it stepped closer, and I realized there was nowhere to go. Behind me, the shimmering arch pulsed faintly, the same one from the forest, but now it stood in the middle of nothingness. The other me leaned in until its forehead almost touched mine. "They'll forget you out there," it whispered inside my skull. "I'll take care of them." The last thing I saw before the light flared again was my own face grinning back at me, as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. When the white swallowed me, I wasn't sure if I was leaving, or if I had just arrived.